All right. So, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jason Haskins. I am one of the tutors here at Wake Tech in the ILC Center. And today, my presentation will be on test taking tips and study skills. So I'm going to share my screen right here with everyone shortly. Um, but I just wanted to give everybody a few minutes or so to get in for those that are trying to get in. Um, so again, thank you all for joining me. For those that have a little bit of information about me, I have a master's in biology. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I tried to pick a different background than I think most people would use. So thank you for that. I have a master's in biology. Been working at Wake Tech for about 3 years now, tutoring in the ILC Center. I started on campus at the Perry Health Science campus, and obviously due to COVID, we transitioned online, and I've been online ever since. Um, I kind of want to make this a little informal, so if you have questions, um, you may be able to, I'm not sure, I may have to unmute you guys, but if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat while I'm going through the presentation. I won't be able to see the chat as I'm going, but hopefully we are towards the end, I'll finish up and answer any questions that anyone may have. So let me go ahead and share my screen with you guys. All right. So everyone should be able to see my PowerPoint now. Hopefully, everyone can see it. So again, my name is Jason Haskins. Um, been a tutor here at the ILC for about 3 years now with a master's in biology. And we're just going to talk about some test taking tips and some study skills, some strategies that you can use to help you with any test. This doesn't necessarily have to be science or math related. It can be any particular type of test, right? So, um, moving on. The first thing that we want to talk about, or the first thing I want to mention, is when we are talking about testing or preparing for a test, the most important thing that we need to keep in mind is time management, right? Now, we know, as individuals that may be going back for a second degree or changing fields or anything of that nature. As adults, we know we have other things going on outside of our life other than just school. I mean, it would be nice in a utopia or a perfect world where we can only just focus on school, but some of us have kids and families and jobs and other obligations that we have to answer to. So being able to time manage is going to be one of the most important things that we can do to help us study, right? So, what we want to do when we are time management, we want to plan our study time. Now, one of the things that I always like to tell people is, plan out a weekly and daily calendar, right? Where you can set aside 2 hours or so or whatever time frame to actually study for an actual exam. Now, we know that things happen, so you may have to adjust that that weekly schedule. But if you pencil in or if you schedule in the time to study, most of the time unless something drastic happens, most of the time you will be able to stick to that actual plan. So penciling in or making a weekly and a daily schedule where you pencil in your time to study is going to be very, very important. So planning your study time, whether it's after dinner or, when the kids go to school, if they're in school, things of that nature. So plan your study time. Now, if you're in the classroom, one of the things that I suggest is always arrive early on test day, right? That way, you can familiarize yourself with the room if you are taking a standardized test and you've never been in that room before, or even if it's your own classroom that you've been in before with an instructor. You just get in that classroom and you start to get comfortable, right? And that's one of the things that can help relieve a little bit of the test anxiety is arriving early on the test day, just going into the room if you are allowed to, and becoming comfortable with the surroundings in the room. That's going to help to alleviate a little bit of that test anxiety, right? Also, if you're in the actual classroom and the instructor is there ahead of time, he or she may be able to answer any last minute questions that you have pertaining to that test or that exam for that day, right? So maybe you were looking over some material and you didn't quite understand the concept a little bit. So you can, if you're there early enough, the instructor may be there to kind of give you some pointers or kind of give you a little tip on that particular concept. Now, another thing with time management is, and we seem to think that it works, and a lot of people think that it works, but procrastination does not work and cramming doesn't work, right? I know there's a lot of people that say, oh, I learn best when blah, blah, blah. However, you should try your best not to procrastinate. So what I recommend is if you know that you have this big exam or test coming up, start to prepare a week, at least a week before the exam. Now, what I mean by that is plan your study time. Okay, well, I'm going to sit down 2 hours today and study. Tomorrow, I don't have 2 hours, but I have an hour that I can sit down and study, right? The next day, I have another hour that I can sit down and study. The next day, I have 2 hours that I can sit down and study. So plan out ahead and start reviewing a week before the exam. That way you're not procrastinating, and that way you're not stuck the night before up cramming, 3 and 4 hours, losing X amount of sleep, because studies have shown that cramming is actually ineffective. When we were younger, I'm not sure how old most of you all are, but yeah, when I was younger, in college, I would think, oh yeah, I can stay up till 3, 4. Oh, I'm gonna pull an all-nighter. Yeah, I gotta get this right. And I get to my exam and I look at the first question and I'm like, oh my goodness, everything just left me, right? So that's one of the things that can happen when we cram, is that it becomes ineffective because we do have to give our brain time enough to absorb the information that we've actually been studying, or the information that we are going over, or the content that we are going over. So as best as possible, try not to procrastinate. Try to plan an hour, or not hour, try to plan a week or so in advance of the exam, and try not to cram the night before. Speaking of cramming, we know For their study habits, most people, and this is, where I was going with the cramming thing. Oh, I've said this before. Me, oh yeah, I study at nighttime. Yeah, I'm good. 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. Yes. However, that sometimes end up happening. You start studying and you just end up falling asleep. And there's several different reasons why this can happen. Number one, if you've been working all day or have other obligations, family, kids, things of that nature, by the time you get to, 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night, your body is tired, right? So you will end up, depending on the location that you choose to study, it is very possible that you could fall asleep, right? So choosing a study area is just as important as what you're studying, right? One of the things that I always suggest to people is try to study in an area in their house or in their home that is unfamiliar to them. Well, what I mean by unfamiliar is there's some place I don't usually sit to study. Right? There's some place I don't usually sit to work on things, right? For example, I know most people are inclined to, most students are inclined to study in their bedroom. Unless there's a desk in the bedroom, it's probably not the best idea, because if you sit on the bed, you get yourself comfortable. Next thing you know, you open your book. Next thing you know, you're asleep, like Homer here, right? Or on the couch. Most people get comfortable on the couch. They tend to want to get distracted, turn on the TV, or watch a show or something of that nature, right? So that becomes a distraction, hence also part of procrastination, right? Sometimes, just depending on the individual, sometimes music can help. Sometimes music cannot help. So it just depends on you and knowing what type of learner and what type of environment you study best in, right? So one of the things that I always suggest to people is look at our study habits, right? One of the things that we may not think helps us study is being healthy. Well, what I mean by being healthy is making sure we eat breakfast is really truly the most important meal of the day. So the day before, or I'm sorry, the day of an exam or test, try to get you some breakfast. Avoid the sugary snacks, Red Bulls and things of that nature, because depending on the length of the exam, you may end up losing some energy during the height of the exam, and that's not what we want, right? So you want to try to stay healthy as much as possible. So eat healthy the day of, eat you a nice breakfast, get plenty of sleep, right? A lot of times we hear this, and it's kind of one of those things that, when I was younger, people would always say it goes in one ear and out the other. I've heard this plenty of times. Oh, the night before the exam, especially if it's a big standardized test or final exam or whatever it is, people end up saying, oh, the night before, don't look at anything. And when I was a student, I'm like, what? Not look at anything the night before an exam? Are you kidding me? Like, that's when I study best, right? But studies have shown that getting a good night's sleep is more effective than that 3 hours or so that you're going to spend extra studying, cramming at night, the night before the exam. So try to get you a good night's sleep before the exam. Staying healthy, getting you a good night's sleep. The next thing is staying hydrated, right? Now, before you take this major exam, this major test, whether it's Again, whether it's a standardized test or, just an exam for a class that you're taking, right? Beforehand, go to the bathroom, right? Now, why go to the bathroom? Well, you don't want any other distractions while you're taking the exam. So before the exam starts, make sure you go to the bathroom. Try to use the bathroom beforehand. And if it's a longer exam than you're used to, always have a bottle of water. Stay hydrated while you're taking the exam, because that's actually going to help your brain function, because this is the science person in me talking now. So water, we know, is what most of our body is made of, and most of the chemical reactions take place in water. So we stay hydrated, that allows our cells and our brain to operate at a good capacity, right? So making sure that we eat a good breakfast before the test. Make sure we get a good night's sleep before the exam or quiz, right? Make sure we use the bathroom beforehand and stay hydrated during it. You can take a bottle of water, even if it's a testing site where you can't bring anything in. Most of the time, they'll let you bring in a bottle of water, right? So staying hydrated during during those study periods or during the test will be helpful as well. Now, other things that we can do, here's some skills, right? So a lot of times, a lot of instructors will tell you indirectly, some may tell you directly what to expect on an exam or on a quiz or test or what have you. So watch for those clues, right? A lot of instructors are repetitive. What I mean by that is they use the same schematic, how can I say this? They use the same scheme when it comes to, or preparation rather, when it comes to taking the exams or preparing exams and quizzes, right? So watch for the clues that they give in class. Hence my Blue's Clues there, right? So some of them may directly say, oh, well, this is going to be on the exam or quiz. Yes, we all love those type of instructors, but some may indirectly mention it by repeating a sentence or a phrase 3 and 4 times. If you're in a classroom setting and you hear an instructor repeat something 3 and 4 times, chances are something about that is going to be on the exam or quiz or test or what have you. So make a mental note on that one. Watch out for those clues that the instructor gives as to what may be tested, what concepts may be tested, right? Now, if it's a standardized test, obviously there's not going to be an instructor giving clues, but one of the things that you can do is prepare an outline, right? When you're note taking, which we will cover right here shortly, when you're note taking, prepare an outline of the main ideas and the main concepts that will be you or that you've seen throughout that class or for those chapters or what have you. Make that outline and use that as your own study guide to help prepare for the exam, help prepare for this quiz, or what have you, right? So you want to prepare an outline using the main ideas from the notes or from the lectures. Another thing that is important for my people out there that are visual learners, use visual aids, use diagrams, create diagrams, right? Create flashcards if that helps for you, right? Create these visual aids that can help you prepare for the exams. Sometimes it's just as simple as getting a little whiteboard and making a chart and putting on one side the similarities of the concepts and the differences of the concept, right? And writing those out and then stepping back and looking at those, right? Using that as a visual aid is going to be important because we know everyone learns differently. So if you are the visual learner, then create your own visual aids. Sometimes, like I said, creating diagrams or using whiteboards, maybe using note cards or flashcards, things of that nature, right? Other things that you can do if you have access to the resources. A lot of times, the libraries, especially on the campuses, especially in Wake Tech, sometimes they may have certain visual aids that you can use in the library to help you prepare for these exams and for the quizzes. So make sure you check those out and go in and inquire if you don't know for sure. Go in and inquire to see for my science people out there, see if they have a skeletal system or see if they have a picture of the body so that you can look at them and associate that with the concepts that the instructor, was talking about, or the things that may be on that exam or things that may be on that quiz, right? Now, again, for the standardized testing, if you're taking a standardized test, then you can still use visual aids because you can use based upon the content that we know that you're studying for that exam that's going to be on that exam. You can use different visual aids to help you with that as well. So these are just some test taking skills that I feel that were effective for me, and I have seen them be effective in other individuals as well. Right now, as we are preparing for the test and looking at these skills and creating our outline and using the visual aids and making mental notes of clues that the instructor may have given, right? Now it's time for note taking, right? Now, I've seen this way too often in a classroom setting where, individuals will just take pictures of the PowerPoint or take pictures of what the instructor has on the board, right? Now, I'm not saying that pictures aren't effective, but use a good note-taking method, right? Most of the time, yes, you can take a picture of it, but also make sure that you are writing, right? Studies have shown when we actually write notes, especially in pen, we are actually learning and remembering what we're writing because we are concentrating not only on the information that we're writing, but we're also concentrating on not trying to make a mistake, right? So use a note-taking method. One of the methods that was helpful for me was every day I went to class, I started a new note, right? I started a new set of notes. So I would date it, for example, 10/5, right? So I would date it Tuesday, 10/5, and I'll take my notes, right? I will have them the next day, whatever the class was, I would 10/6 or 10/7, whatever the next day my class met. I would have them in chronological order. That way, it would be easier for me to review as I am going through and preparing for this exam, preparing for this quiz, right? Another thing that is very important is to actively listen, right? Now, when we actively listen, that means we are engaging in a conversation, or we are asking or responding to the questions that the instructor or whomever is asking, right? So actively listening is another way of note taking and another way of preparing, because never, ever, ever be afraid to ask any question, right? We've heard this before. The only question that is dumb or stupid, because people, most people will say, oh, well, this may be a dumb question. No such thing. The only question, and it is very true, the only question that is of that nature is the one that you do not ask, right? So actively listen. If you didn't catch it, ask the instructor. Raise your hand, ask the instructor to repeat that information, right? Always be prepared when you come to class, or be prepared when you go to, when you're preparing for that standardized test or what have you, right? Make sure you have your pen. Make sure you have your paper. Some instructors will allow you to record the lectures if you are in person, right? One of the good things that I always tell students about COVID is the fact that with the online learning, a lot of instructors did lectures online, so they will record them. So you could go back and rewind the lecture and note take on any information that you missed, right? That's always good. So being prepared, having paper, having pencils, your computer. You know, I know, I'm pretty older now, right? So when I was in school, we would note take, by writing down, but it's okay if you have your computer and you can type your notes. Some people do type faster than they can write. It is fine, but use a note-taking method that is going to work best for you, right? Again, I'm not shying away from taking pictures of the PowerPoints like we have right here in this meme. It's just, it's not as effective for me, because most of the time I probably will not go back in and look at that or rewrite those notes, right? So always be prepared with some paper, some pencils, your computer, things of that nature. And as we are note taking after class, review these notes after class. So you go to class and you're in class, or you're in the review session for, a standardized test or what have you. Review after the class, or review after that session. So go back through your notes and reread your notes, rewrite your notes, because usually if you are effectively note taking, sometimes you're going to shorthand things. Sometimes you may, misspell a word just so that you can, get all of the pertinent information that the instructor is giving, right? So always review your notes after class. That's going to help you when you start to actually prepare for this exam, prepare for this quiz, or whatever the test is, right? In addition to reviewing your notes after the exam, or and reviewing after class, before the next class, it's important. Now, you don't have to, sit there and read, intensely read your notes, but just take a brief look at, kind of skim your notes before class. That way your mindset is already there in the context, or on the topic that the instructor may cover or may continue covering that day, right? So reviewing your notes before and after class is always helpful to do. as we are, preparing for these exams, quizzes, and helping us study effectively, right? Because the most important thing is to work hard and be productive and not work and work rather I said that wrong. Work smart and be productive and not work hard, right? So we always want to be productive with our time, which is why I started with time management, right? So now after we have after we've done our note taking, using whatever strategy works best for us, right? We are still now participating in what we call actively learning, because once you have your concept down, you can now put things into your own words and start self-testing yourself, right? One of the things that I would do often when I was studying for exams or quizzes is I would read my information in my notes, and then I would read the information in the book, and then I would step away, and then I would talk it out, saying things out loud, putting things in my own words helps, right? It helps, it helps a lot when you say things out loud. We've been in situations, I'm sure we've all been in situations where as we are saying something out loud, it's like, hold up, nah, that didn't sound right. No, yeah, nah, that didn't sound right, right? So when you say something out loud, it kind of also helps you to remember it and helps you learn that information. So after after you've taken your notes effectively in whichever strategy or whichever method that you choose to use, right? Now, put things in your own words. Start to say it out loud. I oftentimes say this, when I was getting my master's, and if anyone would walk into my apartment just randomly while I was studying for an exam, you probably would think that I was crazy, because I would be up walking around my home, talking to myself per se, spilling out all of these scientific words or these scientific concepts, right? So putting things in your own words will be important, and also trying to teach it to someone else, right? Now, how we know that we know something is if we can teach it to someone else. So you've put this concept into your own words. Now it's time to actively now learn still by teaching this concept to someone else, right? Now, it doesn't have to be someone that knows the topic. If they do, fine. If they don't, that's even better. It's even better if they don't know anything about it, because they may come up with questions for you that you didn't think of. So as you're teaching someone else and they ask a question, it's okay to say, well, that's a good question. I don't know. And you go, back to your notes or go back to the book and reference that. Hence that active learning that gets you also, that also helps you to retain that information, right? Mnemonics is always a good thing to use, especially on concepts that require memorization, as far as math formulas or things of that nature. Using a mnemonic is going to be probably the best thing to do, right? Now, when it comes to the mnemonics, I tell people all the time, the crazier and sillier it sounds, the easier it's going to be for you to remember, right? And it only has to make sense to you, no one else. So with the mnemonic, if it's silly, if it's crazy, it's okay, because it only has to make sense to you as you are using it. Now, if you get into a study group, which we'll talk about study groups right here shortly, and you bring that to the study group, that can also be helpful because those individuals in that study group may say, oh, I like that. And, you may chuckle or giggle because the mnemonic is so outrageously funny that it will always help you guys remember this particular concept or this particular formula or, the order of, or the bones in the body or the bones in your wrist or in your hand or things of that nature, right? So using those mnemonics are going to be helpful in addition to making sure that you put these things into your own words and try to teach it to someone else, right? Now, after you've done all of that, the next thing you can do is use your resources. Information is everywhere, right? Now, be mindful if you are, using the web as a source of information, because you have to make sure that you find a credible website. Wikipedia is not always a good site to go to, and that's only because a lot of people, anyone can go there and update and edit the information. So not to say that it is inaccurate, but make sure you use a credible website if you're going to use web sources as your resource or websites as your resource, right? Also, most students probably forget that their instructor is a huge resource, right? So use your instructor as a resource, right? Take advantage if he or she offers a practice session for the exam or a study session for the exam or a question and answer session, right? Take advantage of that. Go to it if you can. If not, see if there's ways that you can get the information from there, right? Use your instructor as a resource. They're not there just to grade a paper and give it back to you and say, no, this is not what I asked for, or this, I need more detail, right? They're not there just for that, right? So use the instructor as a resource. They can be very, very helpful. And who else to get information about that's going to be on the exam and quiz or what have you, than from the individual that's probably going to make the exam and quiz, right? So use that instructor, pick their brain. Always come with them with a question. I understand how this works, or I understand, for my math people or anyone that is taking math or enjoys math, I understand how we use this formula to get to this part, but now from this part to my next part, I'm a little confused on there. So now you've let your instructor know that, hey, I understand some things, but my transition is where I'm confused. So using that instructor, coming to them with some information that's going to help them help you the best, right? Other things that you can do is use study groups. So as far as a study group is concerned, I always tell people 3 people max for a study group. Only use the 4th person. Only do 4 people if you owe that person a favor, right? If you owe this person a favor, like, oh, okay, well, yeah, that's true. You did buy me Starbucks, a couple days ago, so come on in, right? Or something of that nature, right? But the only reason why I say 3 people max is because it's more effective. Study groups are more effective when they are smaller, right? You can bounce ideas off each other. You can quiz each other. Now that goes back to that self-testing there. So now you can bounce those questions off of each other. And if you are in a physical classroom, that study, one person in the study group may have gathered some information that you missed, right? And vice versa. So you can put that information together and help each other prepare for the exam, prepare for the quiz, things of that nature, right? Um, with the study group, always come with some knowledge. You don't have to be the guru of that topic. You know, you don't have to be the end all be all, like, yes, I remember, I know, this is it, this is what the instructor said, you know, but come with some understanding of the concept when you get to the study group. Because oftentimes, especially when it's larger study groups, um, some people tend to fall by the wayside, meaning that they feel inadequate or unprepared because, you know, there's one or two people in the study group that has taken charge and they're spewing out all this information and using all these formulas, and you're like, what? I don't even remember that, you know, and that can be intimidating. So you don't want to be intimidated by your classmates. So that's why I always say keep my study groups to no more than 3, maybe 4 at the max, right? Another resource that you can use, shameless plug, the ILC Center here at Wake Tech is always a good resource to use. We have a variety of tutors from math to English to science, um, you know, from all walks of life. You know, most of the tutors are masters in their field in the field in which they are tutoring in. So you can always, if you are a Wake Tech student, you can always use the ILC. It's a free service. There's nothing that you have to pay to come to tutoring sessions at the ILC Center. We have virtual tutoring. We have in-person tutoring. So whichever fits your schedule best is always a good resource to use when it comes to the ILC Center, whether it's in person or virtually online, right? Again, if you are a Wake Tech student, it is very easy to make an appointment with an ILC tutor. Most sessions virtually, I believe, are about 50 minutes to an hour. So you get that one-on-one help with one of the tutors. There also are sometimes we offer study groups or study sessions rather for the math, where I think they go in and they go through concepts and work through different problems using those formulas or whatever the concept is or the key concept would be for that particular session, right? So never be afraid. Again, I always tell people this, never be afraid to ask for help. Never be afraid to ask questions, right? Use your instructors, use other classmates, use a study group. Come to the ILC Center or book a session at the ILC Center if you can do it virtually. But all of these are resources that can be used to help better prepare you for any test or any exam, or to actually help you study, because we do also offer study skill sessions where we can talk to you about note taking or talk about, you know, how to best prepare for a particular class and things of that nature. So these are all important things to do and important things to use as you're preparing. Last thing is always, always going into any testing situation, always go in with a positive attitude. Positive thinking carries you a long way, right? Be confident in the information that you know, right? If you know it, be confident in it. Don't second guess yourself. Always rely on that first impression or your first choice, right? Most of the time when you're taking an exam or taking a quiz, your first choice is usually the best choice, and 9 times out of 10, the right answer, right? Um, Always rely on that gut instinct, but being positive can help improve that, because as you go in and you have this positive attitude of, yes, I am going to do well on this exam. I'm going to do well on this test. I'm going to do well on this standardized test that will now allow me to, matriculate into nursing school or into, a master's program or an MBA program or medical school or law school or wherever, right? Go in with this positive attitude saying, I know the information, right? Because that's going to be helpful as you are going through that exam, through that quiz, because your positive thinking will also help to alleviate some of that test anxiety that you may experience or may be experiencing as you're going into that exam or as you're going into that test. So be confident in knowing what you know. Another thing is, no one says you have to start at question 1, right? There's no rule, to my knowledge, there's no rule that says every exam you have to start at question 1. No, spend some time, flip through the test, go through the exam, you know, there you go. Take a deep breath, go through the exam, look at the questions. You don't have to read them in detail, but just flip through, look at them. Then go back and answer the ones that you know. Answer the easy ones, the ones that you know for sure, right? That will allow you more time to answer the ones that you may not be sure about. And answering those easy ones and the ones that you know improves your positive thinking, meaning that's going to improve your attitude for the about the exam and about the quiz. That's going to improve your, let's say you have to guess on a question, that's going to improve your guessing, because you have now gone through and you feel very confident about these answers that you chose. Like, yes, oh yes, I know this. Yes, I know this. Oh yes, I know this. The more you say this, the more confident you become, the more positive you are, the less, hopefully, test anxiety you will experience as a result of that. So try to stay away from any negative thoughts or any negative feelings about the test or about this exam that you're going into, because again, when you go in with that negative attitude, that's now going to affect your performance on the exam and on the quiz, right? So, any questions about anything? I will leave some time. Hopefully, I left some time, enough time for questions. Does anybody have any questions about anything, comments? The floor is open. You can put them in the chat if you like. Let's see. Okay, let's see. Can you send the slide? Well, it's been recorded, so if you all you have to do is go log back into Teams, and when you click on the recording, you'll be able to see the slides. Sometimes I feel like I really know the material, but the test questions trick me, especially the question makes a blanket statement. Any tips for those who can see? Yeah. So when you feel like you know the information, but you get to the test and it's like, well, did I study the wrong information? Or, maybe I didn't know what I thought I knew, right? That is a time to um, go back through, after that test, really, and look at your note taking, and see how effective your note taking strategy was. You may actually have to change how you prepare and how you take notes. That actually would happen to me when I was in college. I thought, I was in class and, I would take notes and I really felt like I knew the information. But then when I got to the test, it was so in between, like they said, that gray area. And I'm like, well, I know that I know this, but it can also be this. So now that comes to now fine tuning your note taking and even asking those questions in class, especially in the history class, asking questions, you know, that will have the instructor elaborate a little bit more on that concept so that you get a clear picture or a clear view on what's happening. Um, if a professor gives you, hopefully that was helpful. If a professor gives you a study guide to look over, to study, should I only focus? No, don't only focus on the study guide, because instructors, it's good that they give study guides, but it's never an end all be all. The study guides most of the time are outlines, just like I talked about earlier about you creating an outline. The study guides, for the most part, are outlines that the instructors have given or put together so that you have an idea of the concepts that's going to be on there. But I would not just focus on that study guide. No way. I would go through, look at the chapter. Now, as you're going through the chapter, remember, this is an educational book. You don't have to read it like you read a book for leisure, right? You don't have to go from page 1 to page 22, or wherever the chapter ends. Start at the back. Start at the end of the chapter. Look at the review questions. Look at the summary of the section or the summary of the chapter, right? Then go back to the beginning, and now with a highlighter, as you're reading, you're welcome, highlight those main concepts that come up as you are reading that you saw in the summary or that you saw in the review. That's going to be more effective. Now, use the study guide as an outline, but never use it as an end-all be-all, right? Any other questions about anything? These are good questions. These are great questions, as a matter of fact. I found chapter reading is more effective. Yes, it can be more effective, but making sure that you approach it in the right way. And again, everyone learns differently and everyone studies differently. So once you learn and know how you study best and how you learn best, that's going to be the key. That's going to be the kicker there. It took me a while to learn how I studied best and how I learned best. We all do this trial and error thing when we are students where, we try to cram, which it never is effective. And, I found out the hard way, no, cramming doesn't work for me. Looking at stuff the night before doesn't work for me. I need to start at least a week in advance and looking at different things and looking at these topics. So yeah, going through, reading that chapter, highlighting, be careful. Don't highlight the whole chapter. Make sure you highlight the important stuff, the main ideas, and usually you'll get that from the summary or from the reviews that are at the end of the chapter. So Let's see. Any other questions about anything? Any other questions, comments? Don't believe so. I don't see anything else in the chat. All right. Well, no problem at all. You guys are very, very welcome. Hopefully this was helpful for everyone that attended. For those that are watching the recording that couldn't make it today, hopefully this was helpful to you guys. If there aren't any more questions, I'll stick around for a few more minutes, but if not, thank you guys again for coming out, and you have a great rest of the day and a great, great weekend. Bye-bye. Thank you so much. Thank you. You're welcome. Glad I can help. You're welcome. You're welcome.